Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. LeBron James has a contract, but are the Lakers completely boxed in? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always free. It's never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with over 24,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom are celebrating Independence Day, I guess, by Andy celebrating the independence of the Lakers from the free agent market. Like they're just not, they're fully independent of that. No trades, no whatever. The offseason is not over yet. It's really only barely begun in terms of transactions, but the Lakers are off to a slow start. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But Andy, one bit of free agent news or business or happenings that the Lakers needed to get taken care of. That happened on Wednesday. The Lakers and LeBron agreeing to a new deal. Hasn't been signed yet. Won't get signed until the 6th, I believe. So there's still a little bit of time for Rob Pelinka to work his magic, which we'll get to in a second. But Andy, no surprise necessarily that LeBron is returning a 2-year contract for a max or what might be a near max. Again, we'll get into that in a second. About $104 million, a player option for the second year. Broadly speaking, no surprise LeBron is coming back.
No, in a lot of ways, it is both very eventful by definition because it's LeBron James. It is totally uneventful because neither of us thought, and we said this repeatedly between the day the season ended to where we are now, neither of us thought there was a chance in hell that LeBron was actually going to leave. So it was really just the details of this contract, whether you're talking about 2 years, whether you're talking about 3 years, whether you're talking about the both real and totally kabuki theater no trade clause, because they're never going to trade LeBron unless he says, send me here, like this particular place. They are never going to sideswipe LeBron where he wakes up and sees some Twitter alert that all of a sudden he's going to Portland. Like that's not going to happen.
I mean, that would actually be a decent result. Nice town. I mean, there are worse spots for LeBron to end up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, the details matter, and we'll get into why they matter, and and specifically why max versus 97.6% of the max actually does matter. But broadly speaking, this is nothing that I think anybody other than people either seriously doomsdaying or just looking for click engagement would have expected anything.
Right. I mean, like this wasn't even us being like ahead of the game here, like predicting. We occasionally do have opinions like, hey guys, this is how we think it's going to be, even though many people might disagree.
And we insisted for like a year. No, they don't have to trade Russell Westbrook right away. We don't think they're going to.
Yeah, that was one we definitely got right. But the nobody thought LeBron was going anywhere. Like nobody really thought LeBron was going anywhere. And certainly any chance of that was completely eliminated when they drafted his son. So again, I thought that was a good use. Just that alone is a good use of like sort of as an insurance policy. But let's talk about this note.
Would have been the ultimate a-hole move, by the way. They draft Bronny. Like I know Rich Paul kept saying, team drafts Bronny, that doesn't automatically you get LeBron and vice versa. But it really would have been the ultimate a-hole move if they draft Bronny.
You know what it would have been? It's the basketball equivalent of that Arrested Development clip, where Jessica Walters, I don't care for Joe. It's like, like secretly it turns out LeBron just really doesn't like Bronny relative to the other children.
I mean, it really, like if all of a sudden he just enters Orlando's cap space or whatever, like that, he would have been rightly vilified if that was the case.
And again, the son, oh my God, Bronny really, I mean, honestly, like, geez, Dad. So, but this notion that, Rob Pelinka, in theory, had a window here. It doesn't sound like anything's really percolating in this gap between when the contract is agreed upon and when it'll eventually get signed. Doesn't really sound like the landscape is going to change, but I guess we could see. LeBron had opened the window to the Lakers of, if you can find me an impact player, and people talked about Harden, which was sort of ridiculous. And
if you can find me these specific,
but you and I disagree as to whether or not he was literally naming the only people who would qualify. But I think it is fair to say, at the very least, find me an impact player, somebody who will make a difference. And there were certain names that were thrown out there as 4 examples. But if you can do that, I am willing to take less money. I'll sign for 33 instead of 50 or whatever.
Sure, but I mean,
and put the Lakers, let me finish, just put the Lakers under that threshold of where they could use a full mid-level as opposed to a taxpayer mid-level.
As we talked about before, I think there was that element of trying to proactively get ahead of any bad buzz about being 40 years old and taking a $50 million a year contract and clutches control over the organization. They forced Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss to sign the son. He got the coach that he wanted, who has his podcasting partner who has no experience, yada, yada, yada. I'm not saying that I think LeBron was insincere in the players that he wanted. My point being, though, I do think that there was a proactive element of spin here, and that's fine. LeBron is allowed to control his own spin. But I do think that if the list was more than some of the big names that we had heard about, that hey, an impact player could be a super high-end role player, I think we would have heard about it by now, because the only reason this was put out to begin with was strategic. The names that were thrown out there were going to be super difficult to get to start.
But I 100% agree with you that it was put out there preemptively. I think they were very aware of all this other stuff, and that it's a win-win for LeBron. If the Lakers end up making a trade or being able to come up with a signing that allows them to be better, LeBron's kind of a hero for allowing them to be able to happen. If they don't, then he signs the contract he was going to sign anyway. He can say, look, I let them try. All I'm saying is that that strategy is undercut to some degree, that if the Lakers had a trade in place for near all-star X, who's not on the list that people saw, but LeBron said no, they're not on the list, that undercuts the entire premise of that. So all I'm saying is I don't think the list was as prescriptive as you do, but everything else, strategy wise, I think you're 100% correct.
Just the other part, really quick, so it's clear, LeBron is allowed to set those terms if that's what he wants. I am not trying to paint LeBron, because I know how some people are going to take it, I'm not trying to paint him in a bad light. He's allowed to exercise whatever leverage that he wants and hopefully exercise it smartly. I'm just saying this is my read on it.
Right. I agree with most of your read. When we get back, though, the after the break, we'll talk about the other portion of this, which is Rich Paul said to Adrian Wojnarowski that LeBron is willing to take slightly less than the max, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it might be, to keep the Lakers out of that second apron. Remember, we do live in apron world now. And the second apron is bad. Don't want to be there. So we'll talk about that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. And when I was about 12 years old, the Police were on the Synchronicity Tour. Really, really hot ticket. The biggest tour in the world. And couldn't get seats. And at the time, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, because I just said, I'll make sure that I camp out and get tickets for the next Police tour. But they broke up after it. And I learned after that experience, it comes to any concert, any live event that you want to see, Carpe Diem, seize the day, do not miss out. And that's why I love Game Time. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets. Start getting hyped for the fun. They got flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. The Game Time Guarantee means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So it would be a big deal if LeBron took slightly less, because it would keep the Lakers under that second apron. The crossing the first apron makes it harder to do things. There are rules about how you can organize a trade and how you can do, what types of players you have access to and who you can include in it. It's a thing to cross that first apron. Cross that second apron, it's basically like you can't do anything. Like, you are not allowed. You basically are frozen in amber. It is very challenging. You have no exceptions, no, the rules about what you can trade, and it's all very complicated. So to keep the Lakers under that threshold would be a big deal. And I would be shocked if that's not what they come to, because why on earth would you say that out loud if you aren't willing? Like, we're talking about maybe 2% of the value of the deal for LeBron. Like, okay, that you can give back.
Yeah, I would be, like you said, there is absolutely no upside to floating this if you're not willing to do it, because I mentioned this, I think that spin element before with the whole mid-level exception. I'll take a haircut to create it for players X, Y, and Z. Like, it's one thing to expect or demand LeBron take a $20-ish million haircut. There are a lot of people who recognize the man may be rich, but you can't just expect him to do that. In LeBron's position, him refusing to give up a mil or two to as dramatically as you can over the first apron, open up your options to give him help. Like, he needs that flexibility. I don't want to spend his money, but he needs that flexibility more than he needs the mil or two if he actually wants the best roster possible. Like, there's no way around this.
Yeah. I mean, if you're willing, I mean, obviously the player for a full mid-level is probably more valuable than, like, the difference between the first apron and second, but like, you're talking about $1 million, $2 million. Like,
well, you're also talking about trade possibilities,
right? All of it. And so it makes zero sense that you'd be willing to do one of those things, but not the other.
Yeah. And also too, who knows, but maybe by the time push comes to shove with this, Rob Pelinka will have found some type of deal where you offload Christian Wood with a couple seconds attached, or Cam Reddish or Jackson Hayes or Maxwell Lewis, like whoever, or maybe they just decide it makes more sense to open up a spot by stretching somebody, waving and stretching, and LeBron doesn't have to do it. But again, if it really starts getting down to signing time, I would be very surprised if he doesn't simplify it and give up that little bit of money.
All right, so the moratorium is over on the 6th, so a couple days from now. And so there's still time, but the Lakers, if you listen again to Woj, are certainly putting out signals that, big moves may not be coming. Now, look, they might be doing that for strategic reasons, because they want to maybe try to dampen the market. They want to seem a little less desperate. They want to try to make it so teams aren't trying to extract literally everything they possibly can from them, because the Lakers are in a terrible position and feel a compulsion to move. That is not a great place to be. But that said, part of the reason the Lakers weren't able to take advantage of the window that LeBron offered, whether you thought it was completely in good faith or not, or some combination of both, I suppose. Multiple things can be true at once. It was, like I said, win-win, I think, for LeBron either way, but is because they are sort of boxed in. They're boxed in for a few reasons. The primary one being the way the roster is constructed. They don't have a lot of spare parts that are like tradable, that like people would want, other teams would want, but that the Lakers also can't sacrifice. The Lakers are in an unusual position of having to really be careful about which multiple players you put in something. If you add Rui and D'Lo and some other things or whatever to a trade, and you only get one player back, depending on who that player is, maybe that's worth it. But if not, you may have blown a gigantic hole in your rotation. You plug one thing and you open up two other holes in the wall. Like, they're in a tough spot.
Yeah. And look, they're in a tough spot and they need to make good decisions. We've talked about this before. As much as you want to try to maximize this time where LeBron is still playing at a high level, and you want to maximize this time where Anthony Davis, best player on this team, still in his prime. You want to make sure you're maximizing all of that. You don't want to be making trades for performative reasons. So it just looks like you're doing something, or you're getting LeBron and AD off your back, or you're getting fans off your back. I may ultimately be wrong about this, but there's a part of me that feels like there's a potential upside to LeBron signing this max, or saying he's going to be signing this max, agreeing upon it, whatever, that it ceases whatever pressure the Lakers may have felt to close these deals that specifically required a mid-level exception, because you're trying to
or more, what they were willing to offer Clay, for example.
That you're specifically trying to manufacture these deals, and the pressure that comes with that. Not even just like the idea that Rob Pelinka is worried about losing his job or anything like that. I mean, like, LeBron opened up this window, and all of a sudden there's this external pressure of getting this deal done that doesn't make it feel like you wasted this gift that LeBron put in front of you. Now maybe they can widen their search, widen their approach a little bit more, or just be a little bit more expansive about it without feeling, because I do sense that there was a pressure to try to get a deal done that specifically met that threshold. And my perspective on this may be colored by the fact that I didn't particularly like any of the players on LeBron's list, so I'm not that upset about missing out on them, particularly like 4 years, $80 million for Klay Thompson and surrendering assets. No. Like 3 years and surrendering assets of DeMar DeRozan. No. So I'm not that upset about missing out on any of that stuff, but I'm wondering if maybe there can be a bit of a blessing in disguise element to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. And look, the Lakers, on the one hand, they didn't end up executing a stupid trade, so that's good. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you believe Chris Haynes, and I certainly have no reason to doubt him, the Lakers were willing to go 3 or 4 years with Clay, reportedly as high as $20 million a year. That is bananas.
Yes, it is.
I don't mind, like, the idea of adding Clay as a free agent, even though there's a bit of a positional glut there and all that kind of stuff. Like, that doesn't bother me. Like, Clay is not as washed as I think some of the popular opinion around him would think. Clay is still a potentially very useful player, brings a different dynamic, although one that may be at least somewhat replicated by Connect. But still, like, if you can just add that with it, but adding that at $20 million a year for 4 years is
while giving up something in the process too.
Right. It's just that's bananas. Like, that is a terrible idea, and that it would be a wild overpay that would saddle them with a problematic contract for years. And so, even if it's less than that, like, you're still, that 4 and 80 is so deep into bonkers territory that even if you start reducing it, it's still, you got a ways to go before you be like, okay, I'm cool with that. So I think you could be right. They certainly were trying to get stuff done. Obviously not so much that they were willing to do anything.
I mean, thankfully, some of the other teams may not have cooperated.
Right, but it looks like, look, like D'Angelo Russell, you and I are as strong of supporters, while I think being honest about D'Lo, as anybody in the league, or anybody who sort of covers the league. But after the break, we'll explain why, even with all that, D'Angelo Russell is a complex thing to have as your only one of your only trade assets. We'll get to that next. D'Lo, Andy, is one of those guys who, even if you like him, even if you believe in his talent, as we do, and think he was a very important part of whatever the Lakers, might be disappointed in what the Lakers accomplished last year, but they didn't even without D'Lo, they don't get even to where they, anywhere close to where they were.
They missed the playoffs without D'Lo. I will just say that right now.
Maybe they might have been a 10. Maybe they stay ahead of Houston, but I don't know if
they don't win. I'll say this: they do not win the play-in game against New Orleans without D'Lo, because he was the best Laker by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah. So there is that. This stuff counts, and I realize people don't like him and they're down on him, all that, whatever. If you ask around the league, I think most GMs will acknowledge the talent, but he's not so good that most really good teams need him. Yeah, you got a point guard. I do think there are legitimate questions that people have about, if you bring him on, you can't start him. Is that going to be a good fit? I'm a big D'Lo fan. I wouldn't trade for him with the explicit idea of bringing him off the bench. I think that is not something he would respond well to. So I get that criticism. If you're a rebuilding team, kind of a lousy team, other than his cap figure, where you can be like, all right, $18 million coming off our books, which tends to, for a lot of these really terrible teams, be less of a consideration because they often have smaller payrolls anyway. And expiring contracts just, I don't think, have quite the same value as they used to as trade chips. What do you need D'Angelo Russell for? So
particularly in a contract year, what do you need him for?
So that's a tough thing. It's like that's not an easy, even if you like the player, that's not an easy thing to move. And so they are boxed in because of that. They are boxed in because of, we talked about all three of their minimum guys who picked up their options for this year, boxes them in ways that I'm sure they didn't project last year when they were putting the roster together. And then, Bronny, today, we saw the terms of that deal. It's a guaranteed contract with a team option with a buyout for the third year, team option for the fourth year as well. And we can get into a little bit of whether or not the terms itself are unusual, a bigger favorite of LeBron or whatever. But the Lakers had a choice between a two-way contract for someone else or a guaranteed roster spot, regular contract for Bronny, or potentially somebody else that they would have picked. I'm sure he's not the only player that would have gotten that contract, but they went down that road, and it is not ridiculous or crazy. The 58th pick in the draft got exactly the same deal basically as Bronny did, and Maxwell Lewis got basically the same deal. It is the norm now.
Pretty sure he got not basically the same. Maxwell Lewis, only 100,000 of his contract is guaranteed for year 3.
Right. So I said basically, we'll get to that. Only 100,000 of the third year is guaranteed for Lewis, but the 4 years in terms of team control over that, giving him the 4 years of the contract, that's become pretty standard for teams to try to sign their second round picks for as long of a contract as they can, so that you avoid the problem the Lakers had with Max Christie this year, where you end up needing to pay a guy 2 years early or a year early because you only gave him 2 years because you were trying to preserve cap space.
Sure.
That part of it has become very normal. The only really unconventional part of the Bronny deal is that the buyout for year 3 is more generous than buyout years often are. That's it. That's the only real difference between Bronny's contract and any other standard second round pick contract.
Well, the difference of it, though, might, for all intents and purposes, make it guaranteed that third year in ways that other guys don't have it. And also the idea that he would automatically get this, as a fait accompli.
That's right. Like I said, that is the thing. You are committing to a full roster spot for Bronny when you draft him. He takes up a spot the Lakers could use on anything right now, probably a minimum player, something like that, based on where they are. But yes, he does take up space for that. You could have re-signed Torian Prince, who went to Milwaukee on Wednesday. The jokes write themselves. That's where Darvin Ham is, of course, working with Doc Rivers. But as much people like to make fun of Torian Prince and all that stuff, if he were a 15 to 20 minute a night guy on this team, he'd be very useful. Like he was when he was a 15 to 20 minute guy last year. When used properly, he was a useful player. And so like the opportunity to try to bring him back, these are all things that are no doubt affected by a guaranteed roster spot for Bronny James. I'm not trying to discount that. That part of it is where the decision is made. Once you make the decision to give him a guaranteed contract, which is in itself not unusual for a second round pick, the contract he got is pretty normal.
It is contextually unusual in terms of what might be a standard contract. And I think in a lot of ways, the best thing for everybody to do is try to just be transparent about what's going on. I mean, you want to do this in a way that allows Bronny, dignity as a player and as a person. And like we talked about before, after he was drafted, we thought Rob Pelinka got off on an awful foot by, in his opening remarks, unprompted, first talking about the potential significance of father and son for the first time playing together on an NBA team in the league at the same time. By the way, LeBron at this point wasn't even committed to staying with the team. Then talking about Bronny, the player and the person, like, no, you got to flip that around. In Bronny's introductory press conference, when JJ Redick, I think kind of unprompted, went on this soliloquy about how, nothing was given to Bronny. Like he earned this opportunity. It's like, dude, Bronny has
quasi-prompted by the question, but I understand. I understand what you're saying.
He didn't. He got very caught up in semantics about the way a question was asked of him in ways that were not degrading to Bronny at all. Redick chose to make this a bigger deal than it was, and chose to elevate it into a bigger talking point than it was. And it gets back to something I said before. Bronny has worked hard. Like, Bronny was not spoon-fed an opportunity having never tried to work on his craft before. Like, he's not a spoiled brat being put in this position having never worked before.
And he was drafted at the appropriate position in the draft. But
I think it's important to acknowledge the work that Bronny has done, because you should want to be fair to him. He is not his fault that he was born the son of LeBron James, but we also have to acknowledge that there were accommodations made for him, and accommodations get made for people connected or family members in different circumstances all the time. And ultimately it'll be up to Bronny to prove he was worth it or not. But like, it's funny. There was a part of me that felt almost like this was projection from JJ Redick, because he's also a guy that people have questioned whether or not he's earned the opportunity that he currently has right now with no coaching experience.
Really good podcast. I mean, I think people are overlooking that.
It's a great podcast. It's phenomenal. Podcast. But look, JJ Redick is great at media. Like, he's really great at it. But there's a part of me feeling like the lady doth protest too much for both of them.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's a great point. I think he does probably identify with the criticism of Bronny. I think, I mean, to be perfectly honest, going forward, the best solution for everybody. And I mean, a couple of things. First, Summer League starts
the 6th, I believe,
which
6th or 7th.
Saturday, I guess that is. So I am not good at knowing what day of the week it is. And that's when there's not a holiday and they're screwing everything up and ruin. But I believe that's Saturday. Like, I really, really hope I'm not talking about dominates. He's not going to go out there and dominate. Just like looks like he belongs on the floor, has a solid second rounder performance, shows some potential, plays good defense, makes good decisions with the ball, all that kind of stuff. And the best thing will be when we can stop talking about him. and I mean for Bronny, and just because there's going to be this summer league thing, the focus is going to be on him tremendously. This would have been true regardless of which team drafted him, because dad is not on the floor with him. It's summer league. He would have been right up there with, especially in a year, Andy, where the top picks are not people that people really know about.
Dude,
or care about.
Lonzo Ball was basically like a Beatle the year that he played in summer.
But Lonzo was what, the second pick in the draft,
second pick.
But in a year where there are a lot of other rock stars in the draft this year, I'm very sure that at least 80% of even reasonably strong basketball fans never heard of the guy that the Hawks drafted #1. Never heard of him. Never.
I still don't know how to pronounce his name.
I'm not. Did you notice that I didn't use his name? I called him the guy that the Hawks drafted at #1.
I call him the guy drafted one spot ahead of Sarr.
Right, the guy who I can pronounce.
Yes.
Alex Sarr,
the French guy whose last name
brother of
is easy for me
Olivier
to say.
Sarr, who's already in the league.
Yeah.
So this would have been that part of it would have been true regardless of which team drafted him. But I hope he goes out, plays pretty well, goes into camp. There'll be a preseason game where the two of them get on the floor together. They'll try to knock it out that way. And then you know what? We are not going to see Bronny and Bron together on an NBA floor, possibly for months, if everything is going as it's supposed to. Even in games where Bronny is with the team and dresses, he's not going to play, other than maybe really quickly getting him in a game on the floor with his dad to get it over with. That's it. That's the last we're going to see of it. And that will be the best thing for Bronny. And then he can just go and take advantage of the security that was given to him by the Lakers, which is the trade-off for all of the other stuff and the public stuff that he's going to have to overcome, a tougher public road in exchange for greater, not financial security. The guy is fine. Could be making more NIL money in college than he probably is on his pro contract, but in exchange for relative security for a 55th pick in the draft to actually have time to develop. That's the trade that they made. And I actually think it's a pretty good one. But anyway.
Yeah. And just said it before in the press conference, seems like a good kid. Seems like he's a very grounded, thoughtful kid. I'd like to see him succeed.
Oh, for sure. There's no reason not to. We are going to keep an eye on the news. Obviously today is the 4th of July. We've got family, we've got stuff going on, friends, and you guys are all out there too. Obviously, anything happens, we will definitely record a show in response to it or have something for you on Friday. But it is possible we might just take the day off and see everybody either on Monday or when news demands in between. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where we can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers. Everyone have a great holiday, and we will see you soon.